Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi, Dhammaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi, Sanghaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi. So welcome everybody to Tuesday meditation, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm yelling at anybody. I have to talk loud. It's kind of bigger, people are in different areas of the room. And so that phrase that we just recited right there was Buddhaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi, Dhammaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi, Sanghaṁ saranaṁ gacchāmi. And, maybe not everybody knew what it meant, and of course it's not necessary to recite it. But what that actually means is I go to the Buddha for refuge, I go to the Dhamma for refuge, I go to the Sangha for refuge. And so this concept of refuge is something that's present in basically every religious teaching. Actually, the other day, yesterday actually, I was in Oshawa, and on my way to a friend's house for the meal, and I was waiting at a bus stop, and then I heard this guy whistling. He was like, kind of like whistling and hollering. And usually I don't look when people do that. It's kind of like you've learned over time when people whistle and holler from cars, don't look if you're a monk. Sometimes it's people who know you who's trying to, hey, did you see me? It's like, well, I don't usually look at cars when people holler at me. I don't know what they're going to do. But in any event, this hollering kept getting closer and closer. And, I kept ignoring it. And I knew he was whistling and hollering at me. And finally, it was right beside me. And he's like, hey, do you need a ride? And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll have her. Yeah, all right, well, that sounds great. So his car was up there. And actually, I just missed the bus. So it was kind of like a half hour to the next bus. And as I was getting in the car, he said, God bless you, or something like that. And then as I got in the car, they were playing a radio station, and it was talking about the King James Version of the Bible. And I was like, oh no, I don't know what I got myself into here. But in any event, he was a friendly guy, and kept trying. I got the feeling that there was maybe a little more to his intentions in giving me a ride than just getting me from A to B. Maybe he hoped to convert me a little bit. But it didn't happen, so I'm here again on Tuesday, teaching meditation. But in any event, one thing he said to me is like, so what do you know about Christianity? And I grew up in Canada, and so, I know about Christianity. And what I said to him was, all the great religious teachings, they have a lot of good things to him, or good things to them. And I think he wanted to say more. And as I got out of the car, he said a prayer and said, God, please make him one of the great ones, and basically make me a Christian. But I got out of the car, and that was the end of that, and wished him merit. I said, may well, I hope thank you, kind of you to give me the ride, and that was it. But one of the things about all these religious teachings, there's good things in all religious teachings, is that they provide people with a kind of refuge. It's kind of one of the things. So interestingly enough, when religion started to die out of the mainstream culture in the West, people stopped taking refuge in something beyond the material world. This doesn't have to mean like a deity or anything, but basically there was this conflict between science and religion in Western culture, and eventually science got the upper hand, and through various means. And basically people decided that there was nothing else to life except what's here right now. Nothing else to life except this life. After this life, we become stardust. That's how one friend of mine is really kind of a devotee I guess you got of science, because all of these things are not proven, right? These are articles of faith in science, that there's nothing after this life. And so one of my friends put, okay, after we die, we become stardust. So one of the things that did, one of the effects that had in Western culture was to force people to look for a refuge in the phenomenal world. In other words, to force people to look for a refuge in sights, to force people to look for a refuge in sounds, to force people to look for a refuge in scientific theories of what it was that made a person themselves. All these kind of are ancient theories, actually. They were around for a really long time, but they sneak back in to whatever philosophy becomes prevalent in the culture, all these various ideas. Fatalism, okay, we're destined to do this, a sense of what our true self is, all these various things sneak in various ways. So in science, it became, we have these brains. These brains of ours are kind of mechanically wired in certain ways. That mechanical wiring gives rise to a personality and capabilities, and those capabilities shape our destiny. Those give us our future, our fate. And based on these capabilities, this is what a person becomes. So a person becomes their job. This is not just science, this is everywhere. Right? This is a human way of finding refuge. People become their jobs. I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a, gas person, or, whatever job a person is. When they're an adult, that's what they are. That's how they refer to yourself. Oh yeah, what do you do? And I remember when I was in high school, it was different. What a person was based on their social status in the high school. And how many parties do you go to? How, cute is your girlfriend, or, how cute is a person's boyfriend? All these things elevated a person's status in high school. And I remember it's probably different for everybody, but in elementary school, it was a lot of based on what the teachers thought of you, If the teachers thought you were a good person, everybody, oh yeah, you got the, gold star for your, math homework. I remember they had this math thing when I was young. And if you got perfect on your math, you get this kind of gold star. And so there was this race in the class. You could see this line of gold stars beside everybody's kind of name. Okay, you get the most gold stars, you're doing pretty good. And you could kind of judge your status on the basis of these gold stars. But the point of this is that in every phase of life, in every culture, people search for a refuge. People search for something to give them a sense of stability, to give them a sense of ease, something that won't change, something they can rely on. And obviously we want that to be something nice, right? So in all the phases of life, at least when I was growing up in the West, people may have had different experiences living in the West. This is my own personal experience. But it was largely based in each of these phases of life. The running thread behind all of them was who commands the most sensual pleasure, Who can get the most out of sights? Who can get the most out of sounds? Who can get the most out of these experiences of the five senses? And the sixth one, the mind. Who gets the most gold stars? Who's got the best girlfriend or boyfriend? Who makes the most money so they can go on the most trips, right? And if one gets these things, that's a really great thing to make oneself into, right? Kind of get the most gold stars. I'm the one who has the most, gold stars. Really want to make that ourself, right? Really want that to be who I am. Yeah? I'm the one who's got popularity in high school. That's who I want to be. This is who I truly am. It's a real representation of myself. If a person gets a good job, that's who I truly am. That's who I really want to be. That's who I want people to perceive me as. And this doesn't just have to be in these three categories. There's so many. And, just hard to categorize the number of different ways that people can build a sense of self out of what they like, out of what other people praise them for. The interesting thing that tended to notice about each of these types of things, whatever phase in life a person is in, there's a certain continuity to their sense of self. So, you know, when you're in elementary school, those kids who got a lot of gold stars, they tended to keep getting a lot of gold stars. You know, like the smartest girl in the class, smartest boy in the class. They were usually smartest ones from like, you know, grade 3 up to grade 8. Okay, they were usually tended to be, you know. And the people in high school who went to the most parties, had the best, cutest, girlfriend, boyfriend, they tended to go to the most parties and have the cutest, boyfriend or girlfriend for all of high school. Didn't have to be that way. And then also people who get good jobs, they tend to keep their good jobs, not all the time, but throughout their adult life. It just tends to be that way. And so this is a very convincing thing. In each of these phases of life, whatever phase one's in, that this is who I really am. It's something that's easy to build up. It's something that's pleasant to grab onto. But one of the interesting things about all of these things what you might call like a paradigm of life, you know, there's various ones, you know, depending where you live in the world, whatever it is. Elementary school is a particular paradigm. High school is a paradigm. Working is a paradigm. Retiring is a paradigm. All of these have a certain set of conditions that underlie them. And no matter how stable our sense of self seems in each of these phases, when that phase ends, often the conditions that gave rise to that sense of self end with it. So the people who are really popular, had a really great time in high school, what they spend their time in on high school does not lead them to happiness, usually, in their working life, you know, if they're partying. Usually when if you spend your high school life partying, you don't tend to get the good job for your next phase, right? So when that paradigm ends, that sense of self tends to vanish with it. When people have these really great jobs, really excellent jobs, you know, they command a lot of power. When a person retires, nobody thinks of them in the same way anymore, or less so anyway. So I had a friend of mine, his father was a surgeon. And I've been in hospitals a few different times, but these hospitals, they have like this hierarchy to them, like almost like a high school. And you got the people working there, and then you've got the doctors. They're like at the top of the hierarchy. To the extent you hear the people working in the hospital, there'll be like rumors about the doctors, and you got Dr. So-and-so did this, and Dr. Y and Dr. X did that. And at the top of the doctor hierarchy are surgeons. They're at the very top of this kind of hospital hierarchy. And they command a lot of power. People are looking to them. What are you going to do? They make huge amounts of money. People really bend to their authority in the hospital. And so my friend's father was a surgeon. You could tell, living that way, you get used to, okay, you here, you here, you here, you here. But then when he retired, from my understanding, from what I can imagine, it sounded like a lot of that stopped. You don't have that power anymore. You don't have that authority anymore. And actually, one of my friends who retired, he was a window cleaner. And what he would say to me all the time, I met him once, he'd be like, you can be retired and sitting next to a Supreme Court justice and you don't even know. All of a sudden you're all at the same, like luncheons, you're going skating at the same places, you're playing bingo at the same places, and all of a sudden your profession is out the door. So this is the Buddha's teachings on impermanence. In other words, these things in the sights, the sounds, the smells, whatever it may be, that people grab onto, they're tantalizing. This is what's called the gratification. But because they're gratifying, because people grab onto them, there's a danger. The danger to these things is that we lose them. It's not possible to remain the gold star person forever. It's not possible to remain the popular person in high school forever. It's not possible to remain the respected career person, career man, career woman forever. The time comes when these things end. Popularity in high school ends with high school. The big career person ends with retirement. And all of it gets summed up when we die. After we pass away, all of it ends. Whatever we've done in this lifetime, we have to leave behind. And so this is where this sense of refuge in these various religions becomes a great thing. Because when people only have this phenomenal refuge, when people only have this refuge in the sights, the smells, whatever it may be, the interesting thing is that it makes one's mind unstable. It makes one's mind unsteady. Because internally we know all these things are subject to change. A little change in the job, if that's our refuge, oh my God, A little change in our, kids. If our kids are our refuge, oh my God. Little change in our face. If our face is our refuge, oh my God. Everything. Seems like one's world is crashing around one. And so it's possible that with the loss of this refuge that goes beyond sights, beyond smells, beyond the phenomenal world, that people, to a certain extent in Western culture, I'll leave it up to whoever, it's just a possibility, that people have lost a certain sense of safety, lost a certain sense of strength. And with this loss comes these various negative emotions. Comes anxiety, comes fear, comes all these various things. So the nice thing about this is that this doesn't have to be all there is to it. There are these other options for refuges. We don't have to rely only on sights, only on smells, only on the gold stars, only on our careers. There's other refuges that we can have that are safer. Other refuges that we can have that last. Other refuges that we can have that we can rely on. And this is one of the interesting things about this sense of refuge, looking for a place of safety. So one of the kind of metaphors I like to often use is when I was young, used to like to climb trees a lot. I had this theory, by the way. I think people who've been here a long time or many times have heard this story before. But I had this theory when I was young, if you just stay near the edge of the branch, then you'll be okay and it won't crack, And I would climb all these different trees. And then one time I decided to climb this kind of pine tree. And these pine trees, if they are in a forest, as they grow up, all the limbs on the bottom part die, right? And just the top part of the pine tree is there. And so I was kind of climbing this pine tree, step by step, okay, I'm staying close. And then all I remember was there was a snap. And I was kind of on the ground. I got this kind of cut and whatever. I was a kid, so I survived and didn't have any permanent injuries. But relying on sights, smells, these various things is like that. Unless we're strapped to something much stronger, when they fall, we can fall with them. So when you see professional tree climbers, they actually have these kind of straps where they'll strap themselves to the trunk. And so even if the branch breaks, they're not falling down. They don't go with the branch, although they rest on the branches to climb the tree. They use the branches to climb the tree. And so in the same way, a lot of these great religions and Buddhism, they teach, this phenomenal world that's here. We have to interact with it to a certain extent. But our interaction with it doesn't have to be like somebody who puts all of their weight just on the branch. Just makes that branch the only thing they're standing on so that if the wind comes, they can get shaken. If the branch breaks, they fall. There is this other option to stay strapped to the tree and to climb, use the branches to ascend, to go higher. So this is what it means to take refuge, in a sense, in Buddhism. It's actually kind of when you look at these various refuges, the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, it doesn't mean that we pray to the Buddha to release us from suffering. It doesn't mean that we pray to the Dhamma to release us from suffering, or we pray to the Sangha. What all of these things actually represent, the Buddha is somebody who all of his actions were basically teachings on the Dhamma. The Dhamma were his teachings on how to get to the end of suffering. And the Sangha are the people who've reached at least the level where they're guaranteed to reach the end of suffering within 7 lives. So what this really means when we take refuge is we're trying to build a refuge. What all these refuges point to is this refuge that we're trying to find ourselves. So what that means is that we can develop a refuge in our own minds that's more stable, that's more secure. We can develop a refuge where we find happiness that doesn't rely so much on sights, doesn't rely so much on tastes, on smells, doesn't rely on the gold star, doesn't rely on the great career, doesn't rely on popularity. What it depends on is our willingness to cultivate our own minds, our willingness to train our own minds for happiness. Now, the nice thing about this type of refuge is that the external refuges, they can get taken away. We don't have control over them. They're actually most of the time controlled by other people. Careers, family members, all these various things, they're controlled by those people. But our own minds are something that we have control over. Our own minds are something that we can train. And what that means is that this type of refuge, this refuge we create in our own mind, is something only we can lose. Other people can't take it away. It can't be burned by fire. It can't be destroyed by wind. It doesn't change with the ending of our career. Doesn't have to change with our retirement. So long as we cultivate our mind, it's always there. That's what we experience the world for. And this is one of the reasons why the Buddha says that there's nothing that even a best friend, even a relative could do that's so good for one as a well-trained mind. A well-trained mind brings ease. A well-trained mind brings happiness. It's also why the Buddha says that for those who speak or act with a pure mind, happiness follows them like the hoof of an ox, like the wheel of an ox follows its hoof when it's drawing the cart. So this is a nice thing. This is a refuge that we can build. It's a refuge that we can come to possess. No matter how old we are, no matter what our nationality, no matter what our background, we all have minds, we all have habits, and we can mold those habits. We can mold our minds in a way that makes us happy, in a way that makes us at ease. And this is like a person strapping themselves to the tree. In other words, we create this refuge and we have it, and we use the various things in our external life to train our mind. We use the clothes, the food, the shelter, all of these things become accessories to training the mind because happiness comes from the mind. And what that means is like climbing a tree. Instead of just being somebody who goes out onto the branch, whatever way the wind blows, they fall, there's now a purpose to our being on the tree at all. There's now a purpose to grabbing the branches, and it's to go higher. It's to find higher levels of happiness, higher levels of ease. It's to try to find a refuge that's safe, a refuge that's secure, a refuge that we can rely on. Because when one reaches the top of this tree, when one climbs higher and higher, then the point comes when one permanently eliminates certain amounts of suffering from one's life. And this is the nice thing about the Buddha's teachings, is that these are things that we can know directly. Just like a person who climbs a tree can see around, see much higher than they did before, when a person sets out to train their mind, as they go up branch by branch, they themselves are the ones who see. They themselves are the ones who know that now they can see further than before. Now their mind is safer than before. Now they're moving towards happiness rather than away from it. Now they have a refuge inside, a refuge that they can rely on more than the sights, more than the sounds, more than the careers, more than the people. They have a refuge in their mind. Because a mind that's well trained brings happiness. Even a relative, even a friend, even a son, a daughter, there's nothing that anybody external to us could do that's as good for us as a well-trained mind. That's as good as building a refuge that's true. Having a true refuge in the Buddha, having a true refuge in the Dhamma, having a true refuge in the Sangha.